Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight,
the future of Chicago's economy, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to report, remains robust and strong.
Mayor Lightfoot says Chicago's budget shortfall is the smallest in recent history. We break down the numbers.
I don't necessarily think it's a shoo-in for the mayor.
Who's in and who's out of the race for Chicago mayor?
The businesses.
Who the heck is CDOT to not issue a permit for something that City Council approved unanimously?
Why the Lightfoot administration is stonewalling Navy Pier's effort to build a giant marina.
If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment?
Our Spotlight Politics team on Donald Trump taking the fifth and his election chances amid mounting legal trouble.
App workers in Chicago organized to demand better working conditions and a living wage, but they say it's not a union.
What's behind the extreme rains and flooding the Midwest has seen over the past several weeks? And masks and identities are at the heart of an art show curated by Chicago rapper Vic Mensa. But first, some of today's top stories. The city faces a projected $128 million budget shortfall for the 2023 fiscal year. That gap is the smallest since 2019, when the city's budget was short about $98 million. Mayor Lightfoot says it shows the city is well along the path to a post-pandemic recovery.
Within our means and have started on the true road to financial stability and recovery.
And we'll have more on the mayor's budget proposal in just a moment. Hyde Park Alderwoman Sophia King is running for mayor. In a slickly produced video to announce her run, King promised she would lead Chicago through collaboration, not confrontation. That would be a contrast to Mayor Lightfoot, who's touted her combative approach while in office. King says her focus will be on tackling violent crime and making the city safer through, quote, compassion and accountability. And we'll also have much more on King's announcement and the race for mayor coming up shortly. After previously saying only guilty people plead the fifth, former President Donald Trump pleads the fifth. Trump says the FBI's search of his Mar-a-Lago home on Monday convinced him he had no choice but to exercise his constitutional right against self-incrimination. Trump was in New York being deposed by lawyers from the New York Attorney General's office. It's investigating the Trump Organization for possible fraud in relation to how it valued its properties. In a lengthy statement, Trump claimed New York Attorney General Letitia James is on a personal vendetta to destroy him and part of a wider political witch hunt. Trump says he pleaded the fifth because the Biden administration and many prosecutors, quote, have lost all moral and ethical bounds of decency. Up next, more on Mayor Lightfoot's budget forecast for 2023. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
As we just mentioned, Mayor Lightfoot says Chicago faces an anticipated budget shortfall of just under $128 million in 2023. It might be hard to imagine, but that is the smallest budget gap since 2019, when it was just under $98 million. The mayor says that's a sign that the city is coming out of the financial earthquake brought on by the pandemic.
If 2021 was our pandemic budget and 2022 was our recovery budget, this must be our stability budget.
And WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. All right, Heather, this is the annual time where the mayor comes out with her budget forecast. What does it really say about the state of the city's financial condition?
Well, it is evidence that the city is truly emerging from the economic collapse triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic, and that revenues across the board, while there are still some soft spot, including transportation taxes, are returning to pre-pandemic levels, which is really good news for the city because there was a lot of concern that those revenues would not rebound track after two very tough budget years. Last year, the deficit was $733 million, and the year before that, it was $1.2 billion. So this is a lot easier to stomach, especially for politicians running for re-election.
And Heather, one of those chunks of revenue is the property tax, which had been tied to inflation. So the last budget, the property tax was supposed to have gone up every year with the inflation rate, but because inflation is so high this year, the mayor chose to slash that in half. Let's take a listen.
A homeowner with a house valued at, say, $250,000 will pay an additional $34 a year. And to put that in terms that I can understand, that's about the price of an Al's Italian beef, hot, dipped with extra cheese for a family of 4.
I don't know that I've ever heard of cheese on Italian beef, especially at Al's. But anyway, Heather, can the city actually do that? Because, again, the ordinance in the past said it was going to be tied to inflation, these property tax increases.
Yeah. So for 2 years, the mayor has been making the case that that is the right way to budget, that homeowners and property owners need stability. They need to know how much their property tax bill is likely to go up every year. But that was before we saw the highest rate of inflation in 40 years. And that gave Lightfoot second thoughts, saying it wouldn't be fair to hike property taxes by more than $85 million. Instead, she's saying the city can make do with about half that much to keep pace with inflation, another indication that the city's financial condition is stabilizing.
And there are some alder people, including Alderwoman Pat Dowell, who said there shouldn't be any increase tied to any level of inflation in the property tax. Let's take a look.
I mean, I think it's a hard sell. I mean, I think, you know, the council will definitely have a lot of questions about that, and we'll look for ways to, you know, maybe find some other structural ways to make improvements in the budget so that we don't have to vote for a property tax increase. Obviously, that's not something most people, elected officials, want to do in an election year.
Heather, is this budget overall going to be a tough sell to get to 26 votes?
Well, it's an election year, so that adds a layer of complexity, as you well know, Paris. And there are going to be other flashpoints, including the budget for the Chicago Police Department, which, of course, has a number of vacancies that conservative aldermen are going to be looking to fill, while you're going to have progressive members of the city council looking to make sure that the expansion of the city's social safety net, which expanded funding for affordable housing and mental health care, that continues as well. But you know as well as I do, it's a zero-sum game, and something's going to have to give. So we're going to be in line for a tense couple of months.
All right, it's the budget season, hearings and votes and all kinds of fun stuff. Heather, thanks very much. And we'll see you again later in the program for Spotlight Politics. And you can read Heather's full story on our website, WTTW.com/news. And amid all this, the race for mayor of Chicago is getting more crowded by the day. Who's in and who's out? Amanda Vinicky joins us now with a rundown. Amanda.
Yeah, Paris, Chicago residents aren't used to having a lot of options when an incumbent mayor seeks to run for re-election. That is not, however, the case for Mayor Lori Lightfoot, as she's seeking a second term. So far, 8 candidates, count them 8, have declared that they are running for mayor next year as well. Here's a rundown, and I'll do it in political order, which is a finicky. I don't love that. All right, you got Cam Buckner, state representative, Frederick Collins, a Chicago police officer, community activist Jamal Green, 4th Ward Alderwoman Sophia King, she leads the Progressive Caucus, 15th Ward Alderman Ray Lopez, 6th Ward Alderman Roderick Sawyer. He is, by the way, the son of former Mayor Eugene Sawyer, and also Paul Vallis, who was CEO of Chicago Public Schools in the late 90s. Last but not least, businessman Willie Wilson. Now, both Vallis and Wilson ran and then obviously lost to Lightfoot in the last mayoral election. Now, the newest addition, as you just read and our viewers heard, there is King.
Violence is not an abstract problem to me. I have seen the pain it causes way too many times. There's no question about it. We have to hold the people who commit violent crimes accountable. And we have to hold our leaders accountable too.
We will have a one-on-one with King on Thursday evening's Chicago Tonight. Now, Lightfoot has at times complained that she has received a bad rap and extra scrutiny because she is a Black woman. With King entering the race, that may not go as far. Now, Lightfoot's campaign indicated in a statement that King's entry is going to further divide the black vote. That is from a statement that the Lightfoot campaign issued from Alderman Jason Irvin, who heads the Black Caucus. Irvin in a statement saying that while everyone has the right to run, with so many black candidates in the race and more expected to enter, we run the risk of losing it all. As a community, it behooves us to come together and figure this out or end up walking away with nothing. Political consultant John R. Daly, who ran Bill Daley's campaign in the 2019 mayoral race, says with all of the opposition, there might be a feeling that Lightfoot is weak. But he says that Chicago has proven time and time again that incumbents have the advantage. Then again, there are a lot of possibilities. Anything can happen in politics. And just think of the unexpected challenges, he says, that Lightfoot has had to face in this term, from social unrest to a worldwide pandemic.
Just as the mayor did herself, someone can catch fire. And she did it herself without a tremendous amount of money, but really told a story and stayed consistent with it. So there's that possibility. You have a ton of elected officials who are very capable, who could possibly be in that situation. I think there's a even more interesting scenario where we're so early that the mayor could get 51% and this could be over in the first round.
I also spoke today with Jalen McClinton. He's been involved in politics in Chicago since actually he served as an election judge when he was in high school. He's now a law school graduate, and he is fresh off a failed attempt at a seat for the Cook County Board.
For me, having just ran a very intense campaign over the last 8 months, Chicago is in trouble in a lot of ways. And I think, quite frankly, the issues that people care about are the bread and butter issues that we talk about on a daily basis, right? Having access to quality health care, making sure that neighborhoods are safe, and dealing with public safety.
McClinton says that he's taking a wait-and-see approach about who to back for mayor, including whether he will get behind the incumbent. He says that Lightfoot has done some good things, but he doesn't like her combative approach. Now, Mayor Lightfoot made a nod to this criticism in her re-election announcement video that was released in June.
It takes time. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm just not the most patient person. I'm only human. And I guess sometimes it shows. But just because some may not always like my delivery doesn't mean we're not delivering.
Now, that defense has not stopped her critics. Lightfoot's camp, by the way, says that it is taking nothing for granted in this race, but does believe that the mayor has done well in difficult circumstances and that voters will agree. It also says more challengers, the merrier. Why? Well, because that would obviously split the vote. And Lightfoot may well end up soon with even more opposition.
This race will evolve. You'll have new people coming in. There's rumor mills, of course. And so I'm interested to see, what happens in the next couple of weeks.
We in the news business, of course, won't get into rumors, but we do know who won't be running, and that is Chicago Police Union President John Catanzara, also Congressman Mike Quigley. There is, however, talk that the teachers union is soon going to be fielding its own candidate, and business interests may well get behind someone else. Former Chicago Buildings Commissioner Judy Friedland and former Governor Pat Quinn, they're not rumored possibilities. They're both definite maybes. A spokeswoman for Friedland today telling me that she's on a listening tour and has started a campaign committee so that she can begin fundraising in a transparent fashion. I also spoke with Governor Quinn, who says that Chicago is in crisis and needs somebody who has experience leading a major enterprise, as he says he did. Now, candidates will be able to start officially running for mayor when they begin passing petitions, getting those signatures. They can begin doing that at the end of this month, and then they'll need to have that paperwork turned in by the end of November. So that's when we'll be able to tell really who is in the race. Political insiders, by the way, say look for that field to really firm up, well, in and around Labor Day. With that, Paris, back to you.
Definite maybe, Amanda. Sounds like a non sequitur to me, but thanks very much. And we'll also see you later in the show for Spotlight Politics. And now back to Brandis for why local workers on app-based platforms are organizing for better working conditions. Brandis.
In Paris, with high gas prices and carjackings growing on the job risk, gig workers like Lyft and DoorDash drivers are demanding more from their companies. Specifically, workers are demanding better pay, stronger safety measures, and the right to unionize. They'll call for those changes during the first ever Chicago Gig Fest on Sunday. Here to talk about the event and the demands that the group is making are Manny Leyva, a driver with the Uber app in the city of Chicago, and Lenny Sanchez, leader of the group Justice for App Workers Illinois. And thanks to you both for joining us. We invited Uber and Lyft to participate in this evening's conversation. As of airtime, we haven't heard back from Uber and Lyft, though they contacted us to let us know that no one was available just this evening. Lenny Sanchez, let's start with you, please. We mentioned gas prices and safety. Tell us, what are some of the challenges that app-based drivers are facing?
Well, yeah, gas prices being high is a challenge. Safety is an absolute concern. Low earnings while these companies are posting record profits, and unfair deactivations. It's a plethora of issues. It goes on and on. It's truly a wild situation for any driver that's out there working on an app.
Lenny, give us a sense of why some folks might get into driving an app with an app-based platform.
There's a lot of reasons. The earning potential for some is better than what they can make in a traditional work environment, and they prefer the flexibility. I know that's something for myself. We definitely prefer the flexibility that the applications present versus a fixed schedule at your traditional job. So definitely one of the main reasons that people are attracted to this industry.
Manny Leyva, you're a driver for Uber here in Chicago. What's been your experience with regard to some of the challenges that you all are facing right now?
Right now, it's kind of difficult to make a profit due to the increase of gas prices. It's very violent out there. We're constantly dealing with unruly passengers, Uber taking up to half, sometimes even up to 60% of every trip. And because of the gas prices, we're not really making a lot of money. And we are trying to unite and force Uber to give us a better living wages and give us some safety net because we're getting a lot of fake accounts. People, they can create an account with a fake email, prepaid debit card, and we're constantly getting carjacked. It's crazy out here.
Manny, you mentioned the gas prices, of course, as well as the cut that Uber takes of your earnings. Are you able to sort of earn what you need? How much would you say all of this is cutting into your earnings?
It's taking a toll on my wallet. I'm driving 6 days a week. I'm paying over $200 right now every week. That's a lot of money compared to what I was paying before.
And that's $200 in gas?
Over $200.
Okay. Lenny, tell us a little bit about this national movement that the Gig Fest is a part of.
Yeah, so in Illinois, in Chicagoland, we are 20,000 gig workers strong, joining up with the 100,000 from New York that formed the Coalition Justice for App Workers. Very excited for what I think is a historical moment to have all these groups coming together to get behind and fighting for all these things that we're mentioning here.
Tell us about Gig Fest and what happens.
So Gig Fest is going to be a lot of fun, a lot of it's an event for the drivers. It's kind of like a corporate outing, picnic that Uber and Lyft and DoorDash would never do for us drivers. And there was a notorious event in 2019 or 18, I don't remember anymore, with Uber trying to throw a driver's night out at the Museum of Science and Industry, which was a massive failure. And we're looking to have an event where the drivers can come out, bring their families, enjoy some free food, music, bounce houses, and get some giveaways, and just meet your other workers that are in the same struggle with you. Guys, we're spread out all over the place, and there isn't very many communities or spots where we can all interact with each other. There's some online, but not in person. So this gives everyone that opportunity. Bring your family out. We're going to be giving away a ton of stuff there. back to school supplies, gas cards, and free food trucks, etc. So very excited for the event. It's the official launch for Justice for App Workers.
And Manny Lebo, we talked about the gas prices and your earnings, but let's talk a little bit more about safety. What kind of precautions are you able to take when you're driving?
Well, there isn't really any precautions because you never know what's going to happen. It's really crazy out here. Sometimes you get a trip and you don't know who you're picking up due to the fact that there is no picture, fake names. You just try to do your best to not get carjacked or to avoid anything happening to you. Unfortunately, sometimes there isn't a lot that you can do. Right now, we were talking about there is a guy out there with a fake account that goes by the name of Moneybag Uzi. He is one of the guys who is currently carjacking drivers, and we would like for Uber to not necessarily force the customers, but if they can upload a state ID issue so we can verify who they are, because then the police can actually go back to...
So you'd like to see some sort of identity verification so that you're certain that the person that you're picking up is a real person and not someone who intends to cause harm, it sounds like.
Correct.
Lenny, what would you like to see the companies do to better protect drivers and to protect their earnings as well?
Yeah, when it comes to safety, I think the applications can do a lot to deter criminals from using the app in the way they are, using them to carjack us, sexually assault us, or to scam us for our earnings. That is a problem with the application as well, too. So we would love for the passenger verification to be a reality. In my opinion, and the opinion of many drivers, we would love to see them implement a selfie feature. Every Uber and Lyft driver has to take a selfie when we log on to work. And we know the technology's there. We're asking for them to do the same on the passenger side and the customer side. When they request service, you have to take a selfie, not to be shared with the drivers, but to be a deterrent for one, and two, to be used in an investigation when there is an incident. We don't want these selfies to be shared with the drivers because the majority of us are good, but there are some bad apples that may discriminate or target a passenger based on how they look. As far as earnings are concerned, we know these applications aren't going to do anything. When a driver gets murdered by a passenger, they don't care. So as far as what our earnings are, they really don't care. So what we're going to do is we're going to fight and we're going to do whatever it takes to improve these situations. But earnings and safety are the two most important ones in our book here.
Okay, so it sounds like we'll be hearing more from you all down the line as this is something that you work towards. And, of course, we hope to hear from folks like Uber and Lyft and DoorDash about what they think and what they're doing as well. But that's where we'll have to leave it for now. Manny Lebo and Lenny Sanchez, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Up next, why the city is blocking Navy Pier's attempt to build a transient marina. Stay with us.
We've made it. Justice Jackson's appointment to the Supreme Court provides a beacon of hope.
Black women are underrepresented. We still rise. We still show up for one another.
It's us investing in the next generation and giving them something to enrich the next generation with.
Navy Pier is Chicago's top tourist draw, and officials were set to make it even more attractive by building a giant marina on the pier's north side for boats to come and go throughout the day. It's something officials have said could bring $10 million in annual economic revenue to the city. So why is the project, which received green lights from City Council, the State Department of Natural Resources, and the Army Corps of Engineers, suddenly run into choppy water?
The tiny sliver of Lake Michigan between Navy Pier and the Jardine water purification plant is free and clear for all boaters to use. In 2016, Navy Pier officials asked City Council to approve an update to the pier's planned development, authorizing, among other things, the construction of a marina on its north side, where boats could dock for the day. Chicago developer Randy Podolsky landed the contract to build and operate the marina because he says boaters like himself have been clamoring for it.
a marina that would allow boaters from Chicago, even the Chicago harbor system, around Lake Michigan, all around the Great Lakes. Even those who might be doing the loop through the oceans and the rivers could stop at Navy Pier, stop in Chicago, and experience everything that the city has to offer.
The plans call for 6,500 feet of broadside mooring along the pier, with slips for between 130 and 150 boats, both big and small. Podolsky proceeded to get the necessary permits. The Army Corps of Engineers and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources all signed off. But one big agency held out: the City of Chicago's Department of Transportation.
The quoted response by CDOT in denying our last construction permit: unspecified security concerns.
Those concerns relate to the relatively unguarded south side of the Jardine water plant, which treats the water for 2/3 of the city and many surrounding suburbs. Since the project's approval, Water Department officials have expressed concern that allowing hundreds of boats to dock mere feet away from the plant could pose a grave security threat to Chicago's drinking water.
Are these concerns about the water supply warranted?
No. No, I would say that experts would tell you that cybersecurity is the biggest risk to a water plant anywhere in this country.
As opposed to someone coming here on a boat and just jumping and going into the water treatment plant.
Right.
Podolsky says that if the Water Department was truly concerned about security, then perhaps it would do something about the hundreds of boats that routinely dock and hang out in the area off the north side of the building near Oak Street Beach, colloquially known as the Playpen. Podolsky says his operation would entail strong security checks.
We would know boat registration, driver's license numbers, credit card information, basically everything about the boat operator in the boat that should be known to a marina.
Podolsky has now sued the city to force them to issue his construction permits. He says he believes certain city agencies have gone rogue.
Who the heck is CDOT to not issue a permit for something that City Council approved unanimously?
The City of Chicago Department of Water Management, Department of Transportation, and Navy Pier all declined to comment for this story, all citing that pending lawsuit. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, the Midwest has seen intense flooding recently. A climate scientist breaks down what's driving these storms.
If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment?
Our Spotlight Politics team breaks down Trump pleading the Fifth today and his re-election chances amid mounting legal trouble. And masks and identities are the centerpiece of an art show curated by Chicago rapper Vic Mensa. But first, some more of today's top stories. Mayor Lori Lightfoot says the court-mandated process of reform for the Chicago Police Department will continue. This despite the fact that the man tasked with overseeing that reform has been fired. We reported yesterday that Robert Boyk, who led CPD's Office of Constitutional Policing and Reform, was forced out by Superintendent David Brown. Boyk had sent an email asking for 23 new staffers to help train police officers to comply with the consent decree. Brown refused and instead took away 46 officers. According to Boyk, that made it harder to comply with the mandated training requirements in that decree. But Mayor Lightfoot insisted today that the work of reform will not stop.
The training is obviously critically important. It's mandated by the consent decree. We will not take steps back, and I don't anticipate that that's going to happen. The work that needs to be done to continue on the path of reform is larger and bigger than one individual person. So people will say lots of things going out the door, but what I can tell you is that the work of reform, and particularly the emphasis on training, is going to continue.
A key inflation report released today shows that after a year of surging prices, the rate of inflation may finally be slowing. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Consumer Price Index, which measures the cost of a wide array of goods and services, was unchanged in July. Prices were up 8.5% between July of 21 and July 2022, but that's less than the 9.1% rate of inflation recorded in June. And despite today's picture-perfect weather at the lakefront, by tomorrow, conditions on the water are expected to become hazardous. The National Weather Service has issued an advisory for beaches along southern Lake Michigan in Illinois and Indiana. It says swimming conditions will be life-threatening with waves up to 7 feet and dangerous currents. The warming is in effect from Thursday through Friday morning. And now, Brandis, We go back to you for a look at what's behind the large amount of rainfall that we've been having lately. Brandis.
Paris, the Midwest has been hit hard by rains over the past several weeks. Some counties in the south central area of Illinois have seen some of their wettest Julys and Augusts on record. And climate scientists say that these stormy trends are going to continue as the earth warms globally. Trent Ford, the Illinois state climatologist, joins us now. Trent, welcome back. Tell us what areas in Illinois are being hit the hardest.
Yeah, over the last 3 to 4 weeks, a lot of places in Illinois have been hit with really intense rain and subsequent flooding. So in late July, we had a series of storms move through the St. Louis area that dropped in some places in Missouri, on the Missouri side of the river, 12 to 13 inches of rain in less than 12 hours. And on our side of the river, in parts of Belleville, Cahokia Heights, 7 to 8 inches in about a 6-hour period of time. And then just a week later, we had very strong storms and heavy rain move through south central, southeast Illinois, really between Effingham and Olney, in that part of the state, and again produced anywhere between 10 and 11 inches of rain in just a single day. And then just a few days ago, in the Freeport area, another storm came through, produced 11 to 12 inches of rain in a 2-day period of time there, and caused some pretty significant flash flooding in Freeport, Lena, and some other places there in the northwest part of the state. So, like I said, it's been a pretty rough few weeks in Illinois as far as flooding and really intense rainfall is concerned.
No, that's Illinois. You mentioned St. Louis because also, surrounding states, Kentucky and Missouri, have been taking some hits as well. We've heard a lot about the damage in Kentucky. Tell us what's happening in those other places.
Yeah, well, some of the heaviest rain from the St. Louis event happened in Missouri. And, of course, that's a pretty heavily developed area, both on the Missouri and the Illinois side. So you get a lot of really intense rainfall. And even in not so developed areas and more rural areas, you still get inundation of water, stormwater drainage systems, sewer systems. And when we have developed areas, cities, suburban areas especially, where there's a lot of impervious surfaces where the water just runs off, that effect is just amplified. So we saw a lot of water rescues, some trapped motorists, some folks running out of their homes as they were flooded in the St. Louis area. And then, all of that was really, times 2 or times 10 in Kentucky, the week after the St. Louis event. Really intense rain events in a part of eastern Kentucky, which is pretty hilly, if not mountainous. And so a lot of that rain gets channeled into those valleys where a lot of people live, even on the floodplain. And so, people's entire homes being washed away. I think they said, the death count was up to 37 there. So just really devastating there in eastern Kentucky.
And Trent, how unusual is this amount of rainfall?
Well, it's fairly unusual to get that amount of rain in that short a period of time. I mean, there's numbers being thrown out, a 500-year event, a 1,000-year event. There's a couple of things with those numbers. First of all, an idea of a 500-year event, it doesn't mean it happens once every 500 years. It has a 0.2% chance of happening any given year, which means it can happen any given year. But it's very unlikely, right? That kind of low probability it's even hard to comprehend that something that's that unlikely. But the fact that we saw, just in this 3 to 4 week period of time, that many of those very unlikely events really goes to show that these sorts of events do happen in the Midwest, and that, as kind of you mentioned in the opening, that they're occurring more frequently in the Midwest, and they're projected to continue to occur more frequently, as we move in the next few decades.
And what is the role of climate change in making that happen?
Yeah, so these weather events are really they're a consequence of these individual weather patterns, often training thunderstorms, where we get individual thunderstorm cells that move kind of at the same time, moving over an area hour after hour, producing those really, really intense 5 to 10, in some cases 15-inch rain events in just a short period of time. However, climate change does play a role. First of all, there's studies that show that those kind of weather patterns that can set up the right environment to create really intense rainfall events, those are occurring more frequently in the Midwest and are projected to continue to occur more frequently. as well as just having more water vapor, or the potential for more water in the air through humidity, which provides more energy and water for that rainfall for these storms when they do occur. So both of those conditions have a climate change fingerprint on them, meaning that these sorts of rain events that historically had an estimated 1 in 100, 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000 year time recurrence interval are occurring a lot more frequently. And that's again, that trend that we're seeing over the last 30 to 50 years is projected to continue to occur across the Midwest over the next coming decades.
And Trent, how prepared would you say the state is for these kinds of disasters?
Yeah, states and communities are preparing. I mean, honestly, if you were to poll, no matter where you are in Illinois, Chicagoland, downstate, pretty much everywhere, if you were to poll folks in Illinois to say, what are the sorts of impacts from extreme weather you've been seeing or you're most worried about, flooding would either be number 1 or number 2 on that list across the board. And that's especially the case for flash flooding or urban flooding that occurs when we get those really intense rainfall events. So communities and the state are working to become more resilient to these types of events because it is something that we are seeing. At the same time, we do have more vulnerable areas of the state than others. And so definitely we need those resources sunk and invested into those parts of the state. The Cahokia Heights, for example, those places that are a bit more vulnerable to that flooding, to ensure that if we do see that increased frequency continue over the next few decades, that we don't continue to see the types of events that we had in the St. Louis area, that we had in Eastern Kentucky, that we become more resilient to those events and see fewer impacts despite an increased frequency.
Okay. Trent Ford, Illinois state climatologist, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
A property tax hike is coming, but the mayor cuts it in half as she faces a burgeoning field of candidates. All that and much more in our Spotlight Politics conversation. Welcome back, Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, and Paris Schutz. So as we heard earlier, Chicago's budget is about $130 million short, so homeowners will be hit with a 2.5% property tax increase. Heather, first, how does that stack up compared to previous years, or can you even compare them?
Well, it is a much smaller budget deficit than the city has faced in years past. And I should say that this final decision will be up to the city council whether this property tax hike proposed today by Mayor Lightfoot will go through. It will no doubt be the source of intense negotiations and significant pushback, especially because that deficit is so small. There's going to be a lot of efforts by alderpeople to find another way to make up the difference.
Paris, how does this play into the mayor's re-election bid?
Well, Brandon, it's funny. I've covered many city budget reveals, and it seems like every 4 years there's a short budget deficit, and it seems coincidentally to be in a mayoral election year. It happened under Rahm Emanuel. In his last year, he delivered a budget that he said had the smallest budget deficit that he'd had in the city. Next year, Mayor Lightfoot takes over, and the budget deficit was like $800 million or something like that. So I'm really skeptical about what these numbers really are when you consider you've got the 4 major pension systems in the city still going insolvent, still needing mountains of revenue every single year, more and more revenue every single year to fill them. But this is the classic sort of political play. You say that in my 4 years I've righted the fiscal ship, the finances are stable, and the thought is that it does help you in re-election. And it's not to say that there are that fiscal wins are better in Chicago this year, recovering from the pandemic. Revenue is up. But I would say that, on the list of things voters get out to the polls on, city finances isn't at the top unless it deals with their property taxes. So
speaking of getting out to the polls, in the mayoral race, Alderwoman Sophia King has jumped in. FOP President John Catanzara is out of the running. Heather, let's talk about Sophia King. She's a progressive. Tell us a little bit more about her.
Well, she is the chair of the Progressive Caucus, in fact, but she was first appointed by former Mayor Rahm Emanuel to represent the 4th Ward, which includes Hyde Park. And my favorite fun fact of the day is that she received former President Barack Obama's first post-presidential endorsement when she ran for a full term on the city council. So that will no doubt be something that a lot of people will be speculating on as her race gets underway.
Amanda, as we mentioned, FOP President John Catanzara, he's been a vocal critic of the mayor, as we all know. He even tried to set up an FOP fund to run against her, but he's out. What happened?
Well, he hasn't answered a whole lot of questions about exactly what happened, but I think that you can perhaps read the tea leaves there, and that is that maybe he recognized, all right, crowded field, going to be tough to win that one, and he wants to hold on to the job that he currently has because he is up for re-election in May of 2023. So he told in an interview to ABC7 that he doesn't want to do these two races concurrently. He wants to focus on and remain president of the Fraternal Order of Police in Chicago. Reminder that he had tried to sort of work around this by extending his term to 5 years instead of 3, and membership shot that down.
Paris, how is the field shaping up? What's it going to look like to have another black woman in the race? Will that trouble Mayor Lightfoot, or the more candidates, the better for her?
Well, you heard the quote from the Black Caucus chairman on City Council, Jason Irvin, saying that he's worried that it's going to dilute the vote and that the city might end up with a non-black mayor. Now, take that with a grain of salt because Irvin is a close ally of Mayor Lori Lightfoot. But when you look at this roster of candidates, it's going to be, when you have this many candidates, it's going to be about who gets 15% or 19% to get to the runoff. Nobody, except maybe the incumbent, is a shoo-in to get that. So I don't know if I truly believe what Irvin is saying here. I think it's really a roll of the dice when you have this many candidates. That's how it was 4 years ago, and you have more candidates possibly to come. But I will say, if Sophia King, the King family, her husband's a DJ, a house DJ, by the way, in addition to being a lawyer, and they're close with the Obamas. If Obama came to campaign for Sophia King, it would be over. I highly doubt that's going to happen. I don't think the former president wants to get involved in a race here that features all Democrats. I can bet he wouldn't. So one of the biggest issues in the race is, of course, Chicago violence, and there's been a rash of violent attacks on the CTA lately. CPD, the police department, brass, promising to put more cops and dogs on the CTA beat. Mayoral candidate Willie Wilson, he's putting the spotlight on CTA Safety. Heather, how hard is it going to be to police the CTA?
Well, there are really two problems here. One is the rise in crime, which has been really sort of focused downtown, and the continued drop in ridership on the CTA. So that makes it more difficult for people to feel safe, because obviously it's easier to attack somebody if they're alone in an empty car. So it's really got to be both. And we've heard from both Mayor Lightfoot and Superintendent David Brown that they're doing their best to address the surge in crime with more officers. But the fact of the matter is that the CTA is still not operating normally after the pandemic. And until that ridership sort of rebounds, I think it's going to continue to be an issue, because safety in numbers sometimes.
Now, the head of CPD reform, that is reform that is mandated by a federal decree, speaks out about the police redeployment's effect on his unit. Then he's fired for speaking out. Take a look at what Mayor Lightfoot had to say today.
The work that needs to be done to continue on the path of reform is larger and bigger than one individual person. It always has been.
Paris, a lot of people are unhappy with this firing, right?
Yeah, they are, because Robert Boyk was the person in charge of getting the police department up to speed with the federally mandated consent decree. Remember, the department had been dragging its heels, meeting many of these requirements. It had substantially improved its performance in recent months, according to the Monitor, although it got 5 extra years to do this. And we obtained an email that he sent to Superintendent Brown saying, I need more officers here to train. Training is a huge part of the consent decree, training officers. I need more officers here to help train new officers. David Brown not only didn't give him those officers, but took 46 officers away and deployed them to other departments. Now, maybe Brown felt that they were needed out on the street, but the implication here is Boyk believes this is going to make it much more difficult to comply with the consent decree and train officers the way they need to be trained. And many in the police reform community are really wondering what the superintendent and mayor's commitment to meeting that consent decree really is right now.
Now, the NASCAR deal, we're learning it may not be so great for the city as details emerge. After all, Heather, what's the latest?
Well, we know that the NASCAR deal will be significantly less lucrative for the city than the Lollapalooza deal, which was also extended just recently. And the NASCAR deal is now the source of a great deal of pushback from members of the city council, especially those who represent downtown, because they want to specifically know when the roads around Grant Park will be blocked off to public traffic and how much access the public will lose to Grant Park because of this big race. We don't quite know those issues yet. We don't quite have those details yet, but there's no doubt that the mayor is going to face significant questions about precisely what is in this deal for the city and whether it is actually a good deal. This is going to be another flashpoint, perhaps, in the budget negotiations in the months ahead.
So meanwhile, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox, she says the exodus of unhappy prosecutors in her office, it's not about her leadership. Take a look.
I read in the newspaper today about shifts that are being made at the CTA because of staffing shortages. The reality is that we are in the midst of what has been designated as the Great Resignation, and we have not been spared.
Paris, is this reasoning resonating, or will Kim Fox have a tough time in her own bid for re-election?
I think it's too early to sort of prognosticate that, because remember, she got re-elected in 2020 and she had controversy follow her then. I mean, the Jussie Smollett case happened before her re-election, and yet she still won re-election pretty easily. And these questions about, is she too soft prosecuting crime, are criminals being let out on the streets, it didn't seem to affect her re-election then, so I don't see evidence at this point that it would dent it in 2024. But it's way too early to tell. If more assistant state's attorneys leave the office like one did a couple weeks ago and then speak out publicly about her management of the office, maybe it does attract stronger candidates than perhaps existed in 2020 to take her on.
So the Republican nominee for governor, Darren Bailey, doubling down on defending the video where he compares abortion to the Holocaust. Take a look.
I believe that abortion is one of the greatest atrocities of our day, and I believe it's one of the greatest atrocities probably forever. The attempted extermination of the Jews of World War II, it doesn't even compare on a shadow of the life that has been lost and with abortion since its legalization.
But Rabbi Kagan, saying of Lubavitch Chabad of Illinois, said, quote, "We don't know who he met with and his comments do not reflect our position." Heather, what's going on here?
Well, this is what happens when the Republican Party nominates somebody who has very, very far-right views, and this is perhaps why Governor Pritzker was almost spoiling for these fights, because this is not an unusual kind of comment from Darren Bailey. His social media is full of these sort of, pronouncements along these lines about the perils of abortion, and this is the argument Governor Pritzker wants to have, and, it's just deeply painful, I think, for lots of people involved, because these are such painful, deep issues to have.
Meanwhile, Bailey trying to shift focus away from that controversy by calling his Democratic opponent soft or having soft hands. Amanda, that's what the exact phrase was. What is he trying to do here?
Yeah, that was the exact phrase. He also accused Pritzker, of being born with a silver spoon in his mouth, really saying directly that he believes that Pritzker cannot represent the people of Illinois because he doesn't understand what it is like to be somebody who has to work for a living, who fears what will happen upon losing a job, missing a paycheck. So he's trying to really redirect that. By the way, he's also at the same time trying to say that he has had his comments mischaracterized by the media and sort of backtracking on his backtrack. So for example, that Holocaust video, first apologizing and then saying, but oh wait, people gave me dispensation to say this. So it also seems as if Bailey is catering some of his language toward his audience, perhaps a different sort of rhetoric in Chicago than he would have downstate. And that's something that certainly as a statewide candidate for a big office like governor, people will catch on to.
So quickly, a separate story, grand jury declining to indict a woman whose accusations set off the Emmett Till killing. Heather, remind us about that case.
Well, this was, of course, the case that involved Emmett Till, a young Chicago boy who traveled to Mississippi, where he was lynched after reportedly whistling at a white woman. Brandis, I know you've covered this case quite extensively. Were you surprised that a grand jury was considering indicting the woman involved?
Only a little bit, only because I think the district attorney in Lafleur County in Mississippi, my home state, he'd kept mum on this and he'd been kind of quiet, but we got the word yesterday, of course, that a grand jury had received 7 hours of evidence and interviews and returned a no bill indicating that the grand jury was not indicting. There's also the question, the criminal justice system in this country hasn't stood up to this case for 60 years, and what would happen if what did happen, if the criminal justice system failed the Till family again. But they've said they will continue to fight for racial justice and equity in the name of Emmett Till and his family. But that is where we'll have to leave it tonight. My thanks to the Spotlight Politics team, Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, and Paris Schutz. Up next, a trip to rapper Vic Mensa's art show before it closes this weekend. But first, a look at the weather.
One of Chicago's leading art galleries has joined forces with one of the city's top rappers. Victor Kwesi Mensa is better known as Vic Mensa. He's the founder of the hip-hop collective Save Money, which includes Chance the Rapper and Joey Purr. Vic Mensa curated a gallery show in the West Loop, and that's where producer Mark Vitale met him. We recently brought you this story, and here's another look.
The day before the show opened at the Kavi Gupta Gallery, Vic Mensa told us about his creative journey.
Music is what's taking me around the world, and it's my passion, but I'm also not limited to any one form of expression.
His latest expression is a show called Skin and Masks. It was inspired by Frantz Fanon, the influential 20th century thinker and author of Black Skin, White Masks.
It's like his seminal text, and he's dissecting the psychological ramifications of colonialism and white supremacy and imperialism and all of those things. And I felt that concept could relate well to an art show.
Mensa invited old friends like Hebrew Brantley to contribute work. While we were there, another artist dropped in.
Thelonious Stokes, Chicago's own. This is Thelonious's work right here.
It's a portrait of a young Emmett Till and his father, Louis Till, sourced from old photographs. Other works chosen by Mensa reflect his interest in getting more representation on gallery walls.
A lot of his ideology aligns with the gallery's ideology of really making things more accessible and then reaching back into the community and making sure that everyone's voices are heard and that everyone's individual visions are amplified.
Mensa's voice was first amplified when he was a teenager, performing with the band Kids These Days. More recently, the Hyde Park native collaborated with Chance the Rapper. And he started a foundation, Save Money, Save Life, or SMSL, that aims to help people from Chicago and the Republic of Ghana in West Africa.
We founded that organization in 2018, basically as a vessel to respond creatively to the problems faced by the people. The gallery has been so gracious to donate their percentage from the show to SMSL for the formation of an art program in Ghana. And so I've been doing a lot of things in Ghana. My father's Ghanaian, entire half of my family lives there. My uncle in Ghana is a legendary high life musician, Chief Kofi Sami. His group is called the Okukuseku International Band. So I got music in my blood, art in my blood in that way. Quote by James Baldwin moves me, and that is, know from whence you came. That way there are absolutely no limitations to where you can go. And I believe that that's the ethos of what we're creating in Ghana right now.
We work with a lot of curators, a lot of people that are, kind of occupy the art space, the art world, the art ecosystem. So it's been really refreshing to work with someone that kind of exists outside of that narrative.
I want people to take away that the youth has something to say, that we have ideas about imagination, about the future. We have perspectives influenced by but not limited to the past. That in this moment of, sometimes it feels like a culmination of society's ills and America's melting pot of wrongdoing coming to a boil. That it's art and it's poetry and it's film that will be carrying the bastion of revolution and will be the ones imagining and dreaming of solutions.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
Vic Mensa's show is called Skin and Masks. You can catch it at the Kavi Gupta Gallery through this Saturday. They have several spaces in town, and this exhibition is in their West Loop location, and you can find out more on our website. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Milwaukee is set to host the Republican National Convention in 2024. We have a live report as part of our In Your Neighborhood series.
And architectural gems in and around Chicago, designed by a Prairie School architect who's finally getting his due. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm, and proud sponsor of programming that offers advice and strategies to enhance the physical and mental well-being of fellow legal practitioners in Illinois.